AskReddit by Homer without sapiens. Therapists of Reddit, what was your biggest I know I'm not supposed to judge you but holy shit moment? I was counseling a 13-year-old girl for anxiety and she reported sexual abuse from her stepdad. I called her mom and told her mother I needed to call Child Protective Services. Turns out that CPS was already aware and the abuse was first reported around the patient's age 7. Mom was aware of the abuse and stayed with her husband anyway. It was a complicated situation. And it wasn't. How could she not do more to protect her daughter? Sorry lady. I'm judging. My professor once shared what a patient said that made her quit her job. I didn't rape my daughter, she liked it. The daughter was 6. She couldn't take it anymore. She worked in a rehabilitation center for people who have been sentenced for serious crimes and were forced to get mental help. Really difficult job and this pushed her over the edge. Time to get off the internet. I work at a residential group home. We had a kid who we had admitted about 4 months prior, when in a family session they mentioned they had parasites. I'm like, what? Mom goes, oh yeah, our whole family has them. We don't believe in getting rid of them since they're part of our biological ecosystem, and I'm just dumbstruck. We spent 3 weeks afterwards convincing this family it was an infectious disease concerns as other residents have fecal eating behaviors and various other unsanitary issues that could cause a unit spread. 3 weeks of education, planning, and worst of all convincing this kid and mother that their IQ wouldn't drop because they had agreed to irradiate the parasites. Lots of CBT work, but Jesus, it took way longer than any of my team expected. Ah yes, the well-known IQ boosting parasite. I think I saw something about them on that documentary, Futurama. Once had a patient whose wife shook their baby to death. He wanted help reconnecting with his wife. At the time I was a young father of a newborn myself, and he triggered a lot of fear in me for my own child, a deep loathing of his spouse, and pity, the how pathetic kind, for the patient. I tried for 3 sessions, met his spouse and everything before handing the case over to my supervisor, who knew about my initial reactions, and tried to help me through it. Unfortunately, it ended up being more about my feelings than his, and I was new to the profession at the time. These things are expected to crop up from time to time, but I was still taken aback by my own reactions. You made the right call. Being taken aback by your own reactions, deciding to hand off the case, and then, I assume, working through your reactions in supervision or by yourself sounds like a really valuable learning and growth experience. I do acute pediatric inpatient behavioral therapy. Has never happened with a child, and never will. Parents on the other hand can be real pieces of shit, and the way they abuse their children then throw them off on us and scream fix them. I'm a big burly guy and I've cried many nights over this. You're a hero my man. Big mahalas for all you do. I work with kiddos who have experienced some kind of abuse trauma. 90% of my clients have been sexually abused. I have a lot of holy shit moments, but not from judgment of my clients but from what happened to them. I've had clients whose father made them help him dismember mom's body after dad murdered her in front of them. I've had clients under the age of 8 who have been sex trafficked. I've had clients who have been forced to film torture porn. I have holy shit moments all the time. Huge fucking props to you for being able to hear that shit and not break down on the spot. It's not often I get to talk about my profession, but here goes. I was working at a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center and had a client come in who was a self-proclaimed drug lord. As we worked together, he told me about his history. Included in this history was how he got to where he was currently at. During the conversation, this man admitted to selling his sister into sex slavery, forcibly injecting her with several sedatives and narcotics, and having several people teach her a lesson. What this meant, he never shared. He told this story with a blank face, smiling only when he recalled the good times, which he referred to as times when he had enough heroin to get through the day. I'm not sure where he is at now, But this man inspired me to work with victims of sex trafficking, because not only do they deal with the stigma of selling their bodies, they often manage drug addictions. People would honestly be floored if they realized how many people were addicted to chemicals that they were forcibly given. Therapist here. I don't think I've ever judged clients. My job is to understand them and their experiences and help them make the improvements they are ready to make. But I have very directly made my thoughts clear about choices, especially choices parents make for about their kids. This probably comes off as judgment depending on the client's insecurity about the topic. One example was telling parents of a child I was working with a severe mood disorder that had made both suicidal and homicidal threats and attempts, that it did not seem like a good idea to buy the young kid a gun, especially the week after the mother spent the session sharing her fears that the child would murder her. I joined in a review of a secluded patient and he threw a cup of wee and poo in my face when we opened the door. I tried to be objective about his experience, but I just thought, what a cunt. I work in inpatient services, so it can be hard to challenge myself at times. Individuals with diagnosis of personality disorder, for example, can do things that in isolation make you think they're just being bratty or manipulative, but to think of the experiences that shape them to react like that in a given situation can help to clear my judgment and find compassion. Harder when someone bites me or hits me with one of our fabulously detachable anti-ligature curtain poles, though. Hey. That home visit sounds brutal. I used to work in pre-hospital medicine with a population that also that bit, scratched and flung things even when they desperately needed help. Glad to know there's someone compassionate like you on the other end. Not a licensed therapist but a behavioral health technician, basically, means I got a psych degree. I was trained in behavioral intervention techniques for children and was off helping coach parents to support children with behavior disorders. I'll say this, I rarely encountered a child that had a clear mental illness in the same way as when I worked with adults with serious mental illness. In many ways, they were visibly confused or lonely. Given that most of their parents were suffering from poverty, alleviating the burdens of being poor would have likely mitigated the most severe symptoms of many of the children. Advocating for affordable childcare and livable minimum wages is mental health advocacy. I found myself judging, not the children, but their parents. Some parents would drop the kids off with me and peace out with a fix my kid attitude. As a parent, now, I get some of it. Exhaustion and burnout are real. But the best I could do in that situation was provide that kid with an hour-long vision of what it looks like to live in a loving, structured environment. Those kids were the ones I could tell who were much more likely to be subject to the system for the duration of their lives. Either cycles of institutionalization and homelessness or prison. When a concerned parent showed up and asked, "How do I help my kid?" I practically jumped for joy for the child because they had someone who loved them and was fighting for them. When you as a therapist get to that point, it's time to start thinking of referrals. Be genuine with your client. And then refer out. You have to have unconditional positive regard or you'll never achieve therapeutic rapport. I think for me, the one that comes to mind is a frequent caller to the suicide hotlines. He'd call in and say he's not providing his phone number or name. He would just say that you had 10 seconds to convince him not to kill himself over the phone, or he'd blow his brains out and it'd be your fault. Then he'd count down from 10 to 1 while you're on the phone talking. At 1, he'd hang up. I'm sure the whole point was to make me feel bad or prove some point. I don't know, I have insufficient information to make an assessment with just that. But I have to admit when I was trying to sleep on days he'd call, especially the first time, I was thinking, fucking asshole better not be dead, fucker. Your post resonated with me so much. Being a crisis worker is hard and sometimes, like this example, people abuse the system. He needed long-term help and not to play on your emotions or help that you wanted to provide. I feel you and your response. Just checking in that nobody wrote my story. Yes, I am relieved. It too many goddamn responsible professionals. I came here to read the salacious stories of how some docs went ham on patients and lost their certifications instead, or I've gained as even more respect than I already had for the backbreaking and sometimes thankless hard work these individuals do, everyday work I could never do, not with any consistency anyway. Responsible jerks. Thank you, Free Willers Arson. I now work in the jail and there are quite a few sex offenders in my program. I struggle with the ones who honestly believe their victims, as young as 8, were in mutual loving relationships with them. It's super difficult at times not to just say dude, WTF. I currently have a young female client that is struggling with homelessness, a history of trauma, sexual abuse, etc. She's not handling these things well, as can be expected. Grandmother, who is her only support, keeps kicking the 10-year-old out of her house, making her homeless at 10, for acting out, and told me she can't understand why client won't just act right. Lady, are you serious? There was a client, a young teenager that was hearing voices to hurt himself. He had multiple crisis calls and was admitted several times to crisis centers for observation until he got prescribed meds and was starting to show improvement. He was starting to disclose that he may have been gay and was stressed out because his father was old school religious and a pillar of the community. The young man was recommended to go to treatment at start in a facility to keep him acclimate to he meds and just to give him some coping skills and all that. His father pulled him out AMA and refused to allow him to continue medication. He also discontinued his therapy for a more religious approach. 3 months later he completed his suicide. I see that father around and I want to fuck him up. I wish I could. I work in healthcare and I've never heard a therapist, psychologist, or psychiatrist judge patients openly. Other nurses and doctors, on the other hand, holy shit. At some of the clinics I've been in, the conversations in the break room and at the nurses station blew my mind. That's why I don't work in a hospital anymore. I was a PCA and the judgment from everyone was insane. Nurses would wait until the last possible minute to give a patient their pain meds because they were exaggerating, and yet I would be in their room 3 times an hour and they would be writhing in pain. People openly talked about patients badly. It was horrible. I'm a psychotherapist on an adult and patient unit, so things rarely faze me. I purposely do inpatient because the thought of seeing people for years at a time bores me. I've been kicked, spit on, seen a lot of nude people, but I help pull people back from their darkest points. It's pretty awesome. My theory is everyone has a story of how they got there. Even a pedophile. That being said, I had a patient that was having consensual sex with her uncle. Very wealthy, society type people. She went very in depth about the relationship. That one weirded me out. Deleted. Therapist. People need understanding and empathy to work through their challenges. Therapist brain. Except for you, you piece of shit. Therapist. Except for me. Not a therapist but a patient. Me and my fiancé, at the time, went in to see if we could figure out how to make things work after he hit me. After our history came out and I divulged his infidelity etc. The therapist basically said no. There's no hope. You need to get help for yourself so you can get the courage to leave and end this. I was angry at the time but both therapists knew there was no point as he was as screwed up as it gets. Great therapist actually. I just wanna show up when some low effort text to speech channel covers this. Welcome to r/. One time I had a client bring Taco Bell into session. Therapist here. I am a registered psychologist. This is an important part of our training. Our ethics, code of conduct, standards of practice, and our own moral compass are all considered and to be reflected on daily. During my oral ethics exam this is an important question and you can't answer. I would never judge anyone. I accept every single person. That's a bullshit answer, as no matter what, we are humans too who have feelings, emotions, responses, and reactions just like anyone else. My answer was that I would struggle to work with someone who willingly and purposely tortures and kills animals for pleasure. I admitted to my panel of 3 that it would be difficult for my one biases to not pass judgment on an animal abuser. This was the right answer, as they expect psychologists to be able to identify certain populations that they may struggle to deliver competent services to. Not a therapist, but my poor mum has only recently sought therapy for the disturbing things she experienced as a child, and the therapist definitely had a holy shit judge moment. My mum and her family fled to Australia when she was 6 from Ireland in the early 70s. Her mother and father were both in the Ulster Defence Association, UDA. They fought the IRA in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. My grandmother was a major player and has killed people. My mum was relaying some of this information to her therapist, and she had the audacity to try to minimize the experience by saying they were probably just accountants, and my mum had to say, well, why did we flee to Australia after their involvement in blowing up a bus? And why did we have guns hidden in our teddy bears? The therapist didn't know what to do or say. I'm not a therapist, but was a patient after my mom passed away and needed someone to help me sort out everything I was experiencing in the wake of her death. We were discussing some major trauma. I was abandoned by both parents, as well as severe neglect, abuse at the hands of caregivers. At one point, I looked up and saw my therapist had put down her notepad clipboard and was staring at me, wide-eyed. I thought she was going to diagnose me or tell me I was crazy. There was this awkward silence, and she said, "You need to realize how special you are. You did it. You could have been a statistic, but you beat the odds. Do you mind if we dig back into your childhood? I want to see what you were thinking when all this was going on, because it might help me with other patients." So that was a remarkable moment for me. She told me that not only was I normal, she found me to be exceptional. We worked together, CBT, for 8 months on my triggers and attachment issues, and put me on a path to healing. I love her. She's just an awesome person who found value in my damaged past, and in a way, allowed me to help others. Can I answer from the other